Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the ninth online lecture of the course Experimental Methods in Thermal Engineering. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the standard deviation of the mean, and we also discussed about chi-square test to compare whether our sample or observed data is close to the expected data or not. Okay. In today's lecture also, we will continue our discussion on analysis of experimental data. And in this particular lecture, we will particularly talk about how to plot our experimental data and how to correlate our experimental data. That is what we will try to see today. Okay. And this particular lecture will be last lecture on this topic of analysis of experimental data. And after that, we will go for our next module on measurement of thermophysical properties. Okay. So, in the previous lecture, I have told you about one concept which is nothing but called as the standard deviation of the mean. So, standard deviation of the mean I have defined as nothing but sigma divided by square root of n, where this sigma is nothing but standard deviation of population. Okay, so this is nothing but standard deviation of population, and n is our size of the population. So what we have done using this correlation, we are nothing but relating the standard deviation of the population to the standard deviation of mean. So this is nothing but standard deviation of mean we are having on the left hand side. And if this type of formulation we are having, then we can define that our mean is having a spectrum within the origin of plus minus z sigma n. Okay. Now, this type of formulation is applicable when our population size is very large. Okay. And the condition or the situation where value of n is less than 10, under such circumstances, this particular type of formulation is actually not reliable. Okay. So, when our sample size is small, one correction has been given. So, instead of using the value of z over here, we use some value t. Okay, and the distribution from which this value of t is obtained, that is something which is known as student's t distribution. Okay, so student is the pen name of an Irish chemist, William S. Gossett, who has developed this particular T distribution. Okay, so that's why this is also known as student's T distribution. Now, what we are having over here, we are having our delta is nothing but equal to T times sigma divided by square root of n. Okay, so we are having one additional factor T over here, and value of this T is nothing but equal to x bar minus x divided by sigma multiplied by square root of n. So this small x bar over here represents the mean of the sample, and this capital X over here represents the mean of population. Okay, so what we are having, one is nothing but mean of our sample, whatever sample we have taken from the population, and capital X represents the mean of population. Now, this distribution f of t is nothing but equal to k naught divided by 1 plus t square by n minus 1 whole to the power n by 2. This k naught is some constant value, and this particular constant value actually depends upon the size of n. So this particular depends upon what is our number n. So what is our size of the sample we are having. Depending upon that, the value of this constant cannot depends. Okay, and this further can also be written in the form of number of degrees of freedom as f f of t equal to k naught times 1 plus t square by nu plus sorry, multiplied by nu plus 1 divided by 2. And this new value is something which is known as the degree of freedom. Okay, so this particular thing is known as degree of freedom. So value of this nu in general is taken as nothing but equal to n minus 1. Okay, so normally t distribution is employed when our sample size is less than 10. Okay, and When our sample size is large and it is approaching to infinity, in that case, our t distribution becomes identical to that of the normal distribution. Okay, so this is one very important point, that the t distribution is particularly applicable for the low sample sizes, and when our sample size is becoming large enough, uh, uh, in order to meet the good statistical analysis requirements, in that case, our t distribution becomes identical to that of the normal distribution. Okay. So now what we have to do, because what I told you, that this p value, nothing but it acts as replacement for this z value over here, while we define the spectrum for occurrence of the mean at some given confidence level. Okay. So what we are having on the right hand side of this slide, we are having a table which specifies the value of t for given degrees of freedom and confidence level. So here you can see the extreme left column represents the degrees of freedom. So over here it is increasing in the downward direction, and then the individual columns, first column is corresponding to the confidence level of 50%, then confidence level of 80%. So accordingly, we are having the different values of t. So T50 nothing but represents value of t corresponding to 50% confidence level. Okay. So what we require, if we have to define the value of t for any sample of data, we require nothing but our degrees of freedom, and we require that what is the confidence level at which we are actually stating our statistical analysis. Okay. So depending upon these two values, we can determine, say in case if we are having 95% confidence level and degrees of freedom is 15, so I'll be taking from here the value of 15, and corresponding to T95 column, I can see that in front of 15, my value of T is coming as nothing but 2.131. Okay. So one important thing you can see from here, when the value of nu will be approaching to infinity, so this is the value of nu when it is approaching to infinity, and corresponding to that, if you take any of the confidence level, say 90% confidence level, if you take, so corresponding to 90% confidence level and value of degrees of freedom to infinity, you are getting value of t as 1.645. Okay, so now if you recall our earlier lectures of the normal distribution, I have told there that x m bar is equal to x m bar plus minus 1.645 times sigma, nothing but it represents our 90% confidence level. So that is what we have seen in our earlier lectures, particularly while we studied the normal distribution. Okay, so from this particular table, you can see that when the degrees of freedom is approaching to infinity, and if we are considering the 90% confidence level, we are getting value of t as 1.645, which is identical to that of the value of z obtained for normal distribution. So it means we can clearly see that if our population size is large or our sample size is large, in that case what will be happening, our this particular t distribution will become identical to that of the normal distribution. Okay, and however, the applicability of this t distribution particularly comes when our sample size is very small. Okay. Now, in this particular next slide, what we will be doing, we will try to see the applicability of t-test for comparing two different samples. So now let us consider that the xm1 is the mean value of first sample and xm2 is the mean value of the second sample. Corresponding to that, sigma 1 and sigma 2 are the values of standard deviations for sample 1 and sample 2 respectively, and n1 and n2 are the corresponding sample sizes. Okay, so you can see the value of t is given by this formulation when we are having two different samples. Then similarly over here, the value of degree of freedom also depends upon the sample size and standard deviation. So formulation for degree of freedom is also given over here. So this is the formula for obtaining the degree of freedom. Now, based on these values of mu and t, how you can decide whether your samples are identical at some given confidence interval or not. Okay. So what we do, let us try to see the procedure that how we can check whether two given samples are same or not. Okay. So the procedure is first what you have to do, values of xm, sigma and n. These are to be determined for each sample. So this is the primary requirement that we should know the value of mean, standard deviation and sample size for individual samples. Obviously, why? Because these will be required in the formulation of T and degrees of freedom. Okay. Then what we have to do, we have to obtain the value of T and mu using the above equations, whatever I have specified over here, because these equations are involving only the mean, standard deviation and sample size. So we can use these equations particularly to find out the value of T and mu. Then what we have to do, now at this point, if you see the point number third, it is written select level of significance. So this is the point at which we have to actually specify that whether we want to compare at what confidence level. Say if I want to compare at 90% confidence level, so what I'll be doing, I'll be selecting over here level of significance as 10%, which will be giving me nothing but my 90% confidence level. Okay, so we have to select some level of significance over here. Then next step, what we have to do, now we have to obtain the value of T from the table. So I have given you in the earlier slide one table for finding out value of T. While we are calculating the value of T, we require two parameters. Okay. The very first parameter is degrees of freedom, mu, so which is already known to us using the above equation, and second parameter is nothing but confidence level. So over here, while we will be determining the value of T from the table, what we have to do, we have to select the confidence level by considering the half of selected significance level. So it means if we have selected 10% significance level, while we will be determining the value from the table, what we have to do, instead of 10% significance level, we have to write it for 5% significance level. So 5% significance level, nothing but it gives us confidence level of 95%. So we will be determining the value of T95 corresponding to given degrees of freedom. Okay. Now what we have to do, we have to check if our calculated value of T. So calculated value of T is nothing but coming from this above equation. So this is the step where we have used these two equations for calculating the values of T and mu. So if our calculated value of T is less than the obtained T from table. So from table we have just now determined. Okay. So if our calculated value of T is less than the obtained value, then we can say that whatever the two samples we are having under observations, these are nothing but statistically same. Okay. At the selected confidence level. So now you can see we are having two values of confidence level. One which we have selected and one which we have employed for obtaining the value of T from the table. So what we have to do, we have to specify over here the confidence interval which we have actually selected initially. Okay. So this is how we can employ our T test for comparing the two different samples, and we can conclude whether our samples are statistically same or different at the selected confidence level. Okay. So what you can do, you can go to your textbook and you can try some of the example problems for comparing the different samples using this procedure which is specified over here. And I have already uploaded the assignments also. So in assignment number 2, you will be finding some of the problems related to this procedure. Okay, so next our topic is of graphical analysis and curve fitting. So already the techniques of curve fitting I have specified you in our previous lecture, and in this particular lecture we will try to see some of the graphical analysis. Okay, so one important point I would like to highlight over here, when we do the experiments we obtain some data set. Okay, and then generally in our experiments what we do, we will be having some independent parameters and some dependent parameters. Okay, and we may have large number of combinations for dependent and independent parameters. But if we have to conclude something from the experiments, generally what we do, we keep some set of parameters as constant and we vary a single parameter and we try to estimate its effect on some another parameter. Okay. So majority of the times you will be finding that we will plot two-dimensional curves. Okay. However, in some of the cases, there may be requirement of use of multiple variables, and we may need to go for the three-dimensional plots, etc. Okay. So, but in this particular lecture, we will concentrate ourselves on two-dimensional plots only. Okay. So generally what we do, we try to get some data from our experimental measurements, say x1, x2, x3, and corresponding to that, we will calculate our results. Either these may be experimentally measured or this result, whatever I am writing over here, y1, y2, y3, it may also be something which is measured experimentally and then further it is refined for obtaining our uh, final outcomes. Okay. So if you will be plotting any of the experimental result, we may find different type of arrangements. For example, one pattern may be your result is showing this type of plot. Another pattern may be you are having almost linear variation of the curve. So here you can see this curve is actually almost linear. Okay. So what we have to do, basically, whatever the experimental data we have obtained, from that experimental data, generally we try to do the curve fitting, and based on the curve fitting, we try to correlate some correlations in between our parameters which are under observation. Okay. So one important point I would like to highlight over here, whenever we will be plotting our experimental data on the graphs, always if we are having some linear trend, that is easiest to identify. Okay. And apart from linear, if we are having any other formulation between the two parameters, that is something which by just visual inspections we cannot actually identify. Okay, for example, if I consider one variation, something like this, say my data set is following this type of trend. Okay, now I am not sure whether I should fit over here quadratic relation, quadratic equation, or should I fit cubic equation, fourth order polynomial, or should I go for some power law equation, or should I go for some exponential equation? So that is something which we cannot figure it out. Okay, and if our data set is following some sort of linear trend, that is so linear equation is something which is easiest most to identify. Okay, so what we will be doing, whenever we will be plotting our experimental data, majority of the times we will try to select our plot in such a way so that we are getting the linear trend over our graphical representation. Okay, so let us first try to see that if our data set shows linear relation y is equal to ax plus b. In that case, if we take linear graph paper, on the linear graph paper, y if we are taking along ordinate and x we are taking along abscissa, so we will be having our trend something like this. So this straight line will be nothing but representing our experimental data. Okay, where we are having slope of this line as a and b as nothing but intercept. Okay, then say now let us consider that whatever data we are having, that is showing some sort of power law. Okay, y equal to 8 into x times b. But if I plot it on a linear scale, I'll be getting some scattered points, and once again I'll be confused that whether to relate this scattered points with quadratic polynomial or third order polynomial or exponential fit. Okay, so we'll be having some sort of confusion. Okay, so now what I am considering, initially I am knowing from my say earlier experimental literature or from basic analytical theories that my relation will be of the order of the type power law. Okay, so in that case, because while we will be plotting, what we want that our curve or our experimental trend should be close enough to the linear one. So that is one. Why? Because linear one is easy to identify. Okay. So that's why what we will be doing, if we take the log on both sides, we will be having ln of y equal to ln of a plus b times ln of x. Okay. So now if whole this ln of y you call it as y dash, and this ln of a, let me write it like this only, it's a constant quantity, plus b is also constant, and this ln of x, if I am writing it as x dash. So it means from here you can see this is nothing but our constant parameter. This parameter is becoming identical to that of the slope of the straight line, and x dash and y dash are our variables. So it means y dash is equal to c plus mx. It is becoming nothing but our straight line equation. So it means if I plot y dash and x dash on our linear scale, it will be showing the straight line. Okay, but our data is in the form of y and x, so we will try to plot it in the form of y and x only. So in terms of y and x, if you see over here, ln of y is, if we take logarithmic of y along our ordinate and logarithmic of x along abscissa, so in that case also we will be finding nothing but our straight line, and we will be having intercept as equal to ln of a and slope will be equal to b. So it means if we are having power law correlation in between our parameters which we have experimentally obtained, if we plot these parameters on log paper, we will be having linear relation between these. Okay. Then another type of correlation may exist of exponential type, y is equal to a e power bx. So in case of exponential correlations, what will be happening if you now take the log on both sides, ln of y will become nothing but ln of a plus b times x. Why? Because ln and exponential will be cancelling out. Okay, so from here you can clearly see that in the left hand side we are having ln y, and over here we are having this as constant term, and then this is equal to bx. So this is once again becoming identical to that of a straight line. So over here you can see that x is varying in a linear fashion and y is taking the logarithmic nature. Okay, so what we can do, we can consider semi-log graph paper where we will be having ordinate axis as log scale and uh, abscissa as linear scale. So if we plot on this semi-log paper our data, it will be once again showing the linear trend. Okay, and particularly this type of exponential nature where you will be finding, for example, if you are doing the experiment of the system where we are having some hot water and the temperature of water is being measured with the help of a thermometer, and what you are doing, you are recording the temperature of the thermometer at different times T1, T2, T3. Okay, so already we know that this thermometer and water system is nothing but a first order system, and if we are dipping this thermometer from ambient into some given water temperature, so this is nothing but input will be acting as a step input which is given to this system. So the response of step input to a first order system is of nothing but exponential type. So in that case, if you are doing this type of experiment, it is always better to plot the value of temperature as function of on a semi-log paper as function of time. Okay, so this is like physical example where you can do this experiment and you can plot your data on the semi-log paper and you can confirm whether you are getting this linear trend on the semi-log paper or not. Okay. Then we may have another type of nature as y equal to x divided by a plus bx. So in that case, if you just simplify this equation a little bit, you will be finding that 1 by x will become, so x I am taking to that side and y if I am taking to this side, and a plus bx also I have taken to that side. So a plus bx by x will become nothing but equal to 1 by y, and finally we will get 1 by y is nothing but equal to a by x plus D. So once again, this equation has become identical to that of the straight line if we take our abscissa as 1 by x and ordinate as 1 by y. Okay. So similarly, then what we can do, if we are having the quadratic nature in between the dependent and the independent variable, that quadratic nature can also be simplified by considering y minus y1 divided by x minus x1 along ordinate, and we can plot it on with x, and then this also will give us nothing but a linear nature. Okay. Then few more examples are included over here. So this is for y equal to x by a plus bx plus c. So here also, if we are taking x minus x1 divided by y minus y1, so we will be getting linear variation over here. Okay. The next example is if our equation type is y equal to a e times bx plus cx square. So here we can choose this particular formulation along uh, ordinate, and x we are having linear scale along x. So this particular plot can be plotted on semi-log paper. Okay. And similarly, so you can clearly see one clear thing, clear distinction is over here, that if anything we are having which is involving exponential, generally we need to plot that one on our semi-log graph paper. Okay. And if we are having any algebraic expression, that normally we can plot it on linear scale. And if we are having any expression which is involving the powers, so that we have to plot on the log scale. Okay. Then a few more things are given. Y equal to a by bx. So algebraic equation, once again we have to plot it on linear paper. Then y equal to a plus b square root x. That also we can plot it on linear paper. But one thing we have to consider, that we have to consider root x along abscissa instead of x. Okay. So this is all about the selection of the graph paper. That we are having three different type of graph papers available. A linear scale, then we are having semi-log paper, then we are having log scale. So which type of log scale we choose, which type of graph paper we choose for representing our experimental data, that is what actually has been stated over here. Okay. And moreover, one thing you can observe, that all the different type of expressions or correlations whatever we have used over here, for each and every correlation we have tried to arrange our variables in such a fashion so that we are getting always linear trend. Why we are doing so? Because experimentally we will be having always some scattered set of data. Okay, so we will not be exactly able to identify that what type of correlation our data set is having if we are going for linear paper uh, every time. Okay, using the direct use of variables along ordinate and abscissa. Okay, and as I have already stated you that r square is nothing, is not a clear indication that always our data set is following that type of curve fit. Why? Because we have seen in the previous example that when we will be increasing our order of the polynomial, and once the order of the polynomial will become equivalent to that of the number of data points, in that case we may get r square value close to 1. It means our curve is passing through each and every data point, but ultimately what can happen in between the two data points, it may give us some wrong data set which will be actually leading to the fluctuations. Okay. Now next very important topic is there, which is about the choices of graph formats. Okay, so if you see or if you go through the literature, you will be finding that while we plot experimental data, large number of graph formats are available by using which you can plot your experimental data. Okay, so the very first type of plot is nothing but we are using. So clearly you can see I have included over here 6 different graph formats, and for each of this graph, what we are having the same set of data, but this same set of data is actually represented in different ways. Okay, So in the first graph, what we are having, we have only represented the scatter points where we are having our actual measurements are taken. Okay. Then in second type of graph, what we are having actual measurements plus uh, what we have done. Apart from that, between the measurement points, we have joined a line, and this line is nothing but representing the smooth fit between these points. Okay, so this is nothing but a smoothly fitted line in between the observed data set. Okay, in third case, what we have done, we have not plotted our observations, only we have given the smoothly fitted line. Okay. Then in fourth case, what we are having our experimental observations, and in between the two experimental observations, we have fitted a linear line. So here you can see we are nothing but having linear variation in between the two data points. Okay. Then fifth type of graph we have taken, where we have only represented the linear fit between the two data points and individual data values are not included. Okay. Then last type of graph, what we have done, here we have actually fitted this curve with the help of methods of least squares. We have taken the closest fit, and around this closest fit, our actually observations are scattered. Okay. So different types of formats can be there to represent our experimental data. So particularly the first type of plot we will be following normally when we are having our large data set available, and at the same point, if we are having phenomenon which is very new, for which we are not knowing from our prior knowledge that what type of trend it should fit. Okay. And obviously for this type of graph, we will be only for this type of data set, only we will be going for curve fitting if we are having large enough data to physically explain that phenomenon, and we are sure enough that we have accounted for all the different types of uncertainties what are there in our data set. Okay. Then second type of curve which I have shown over here, here we are having the individual experimental values, and apart from that we are having some smoothly fitted line in between the different experimental observations. Okay. So this particular type of curve represents that whatever this curve we are having, nothing but it is following some following some phenomenon physically. Okay. So over here we have to be very careful that if our points are not close enough to each other, then we should not go for this type of smooth fit. Okay. Otherwise, it may give some wrong representation to our physical phenomenon. Okay. So clearly, one thing you can observe that if we fit this smooth line over here, we are not able to get any particular trend which our data set is showing. So let us say if we are relating this particular type of observations to our temperature time data, as I have stated you in the previous slide. So in that case, our curve should have exponential fit. So if it should have exponential fit, then our best fitted line should be something like this. Okay. Whereas over here, what you can see, whatever this smooth line we have fitted, this line is actually having significant deviations from the exponential trend. So it means this line is actually giving us some reflection that our physical phenomenon is following this type of variation between the two data points. However, this is nothing but a wrong depiction of the physical phenomenon. So normally for experimental data set, we should not go for this type of smoothly fitted line in between the two data points. And third type of curve is not acceptable for the experimental measurements, because whatever the experimental points we have measured, we should clearly reflect these experimental observations in our plot. Okay, so this type of curves are normally used when we are having the continuous data. So continuous data means if you are solving some analytical expression. Okay, so what you can do in this analytical expression, we can give the all very small values of x, and we can try to get almost a continuous type of plot. Okay, so that's why whatever this third type of plot is represented over here, this is mainly plotted in case we are representing the data set, or the trend of the phenomenon from any analytical expression. Okay. Then third type of data set, what it reflects that in between the two data points, if we have to determine any value, that is nothing but showing a linear trend, and using the linear interpolation, we can approximate the value. Okay, so this type of formulation should be particularly employed if our two points are actually close enough to each other. Okay, if we are having significant difference between the 2 points, or one more thing we can also consider, that here you can observe that in this particular zone, our slope of this linear fit is small, whereas in this particular zone, the slope of linear fit is very large. So where slope is less, there we may go for this type of linear interpolation. However, in case of large slopes, if these slopes are consistent between the consecutive data points, then we can apply the linear interpolation. Okay. However, if our slopes are not consistent and giving the significant fluctuations, in that case, we should go for more number of data points in order to first get some more accurate experimental observations, and then we should employ this for finding out the intermediate data points. Otherwise, once again, this will be giving us some wrong reflection of the physical phenomenon. Okay. And once again, the final one, this is not fifth one, this is not acceptable in case of experimental measurements. And this is something which is once again can be employed if we are having the results from any analytical expression. Okay. Then last type of plot, which is shown over here, this type of plot is generally recommended where we are already knowing our correlation in between the dependent and the independent variable from our theoretical knowledge. Okay, so as in case of the example I have stated in the previous slide, so we know that in between the temperature and time, we are having nothing but exponential trend. So that is something which we know from the theoretical understanding. So now what we can do, if we are doing experiment for this type of physical situation, so there what we can do, we can represent our experimental data points, and also we can fit these data points with the help of some exponential curve. Okay, so curve fitting normally we employ only if we are knowing from the theoretical understanding that what type of correlation is existing between the dependent and the independent variable, or in second situation also we can employ the curve fitting whether in situation where already some experimental measurements are available in the literature, and these have already given some particular type of trend. Okay, but once again, we should not blindly believe on the existing literature also in terms of experimental measurements, and we should try to first relate it to some theoretical correlation, and if our theory is actually following some particular type of trend, then only we should go for fitting the equation over there. Okay. Then there are three different terms, and these are actually interrelated to each other, and these are very, very important, and one should be very much clear about these three different things. So first is called as causation. The meaning of causation is cause and effect. Second one is called as correlation, which is nothing but represents the relationship between two parameters or multiple parameters, whatever we are plotting. And curve fitting is something which represents the best fitted profile through our experimental observations. Okay, so now let us try to understand these three different terms with the help of one simple example. Okay, so let us consider we are having one container, and inside this container, say we are having some heater coil over there. Okay, so this is some heater surface, and let us consider the temperature of this heater surface is nothing but equal to Ts, and this container is completely filled with saturated water. So this is having saturated temperature, and let us consider that our pressure is nothing but 1 atmospheric. So in that case, saturation temperature will be 100 degrees Celsius. Now if we consider that we are maintaining some constant surface temperature over here, which is greater than T saturation. Okay, so now what will be happening in this particular type of phenomenon? from the surface of the heater, we will be finding that there will be formation of some vapor bubble, and these vapor bubbles will be actually detaching from this surface, okay, and we will be finding some vapor bubbles which will be rising in this liquid pool, okay. So ultimately what is happening, basically this liquid is gaining some heat from the surface in the form of its latent heat of vaporization. So we are having certain transfer of heat or flow of heat from this heater surface to the liquid, okay. Now let us consider that heat flux is nothing but Q double dash is the heat flux which we are measuring, and Ts is the surface temperature which we are maintaining. Okay, so what will be happening over here, for the initial surface temperature of Ts1, we will be finding some value of heat flux as Q1 double dash. Then at some another surface temperature Ts2, we will be having some another value of heat flux as Q2 double dash. Okay, and it is already experimentally proved that when our surface temperature will be increasing, in that case what will be happening, our heat flux will increase, okay. So this is nothing but, fundamentally if we see, this is nothing but our phenomenon of nucleate boiling, okay. Now in this process, if you see, say if I plot one curve in between our heat flux and surface temperature Ts, okay, and say we have performed experiment under some stated range of temperature, and in this particular stated range of the surface temperature we have got some increasing trend in between the heat flux and the temperature, okay. So from here, you can get some reflection that while you have maintained pressure at 1 atmospheric and saturation temperature at 100 degrees Celsius and increased the surface temperature, your heat flux has increased. Okay, so it means you can clearly get a picture that surface temperature is something which is a cause, and because of increase of the surface temperature, you are getting the effect as nothing but increase of heat transfer. Okay. So the way initial observation of this data will be telling us that we are having uh, surface temperature as the cause and increase in heat flux as the effect which has occurred because of the surface temperature. Okay. So this is something which our data set is actually reflecting. But if physically you see from the fundamental aspects, you can observe from here that when you will be increasing the surface temperature, what is basically happening over here, you are having some formation of the vapor bubble, and this vapor bubble is actually detaching from the surface, okay. So and the actually departure formation of this vapor bubble and departure of the vapor bubble is actually controllable parameter which basically defines the rate at which our heat will be transferring from the surface to the liquid, okay. So from here you can see that the surface temperature is not a sole criteria which is actually controlling the heat flux. So that is also some parameter, but surface temperature in turn is actually changing the formation, nucleation of the bubble and its departure frequency, bubble diameter, etc., and which in turn is actually affecting our heat flux criteria. Okay, so our data sometimes may give wrong reflection of the physical phenomena. Our data is showing that if we increase the surface temperature, it will be actually increasing the heat flux. Okay. Now, if you do this experiment for large range of surface temperature, you will be finding that we will be having curve something like this. Okay, so here you can see that your heat flux is reaching some maximum value, and after that maximum value your heat flux has decreased, and then once again it has increased. Okay, so this particular trend, why after this point our heat flux decreases, this particular thing is something which is associated with the bubble departure dynamics from the surface, okay, and which is associated with the fundamental understanding of the phenomenon. So one important point I would like to highlight over here, that immediately we should not conclude anything by just looking the trend of our experimental data set. Okay. Then second point is correlation. So correlation is something you can see over here that this heat flux is having some variation with the surface temperature. So if you try to correlate this particular dependence of heat flux and temperature, already if you have taken the course of heat transfer, in our particularly in our boiling heat transfer, we study our boiling curve. So this type of curve in between the heat flux and Ts minus T saturation is something which is known as a boiling curve. So if we study the boiling curve, we are having nothing but different regime of heat transfer, nucleate boiling, film boiling, etc. And in each individual regime, we are having different correlation in between the heat flux and the surface temperature. Okay. And third thing, we are having curve fit. So curve fit already I have told you. So what we try to do over here, we try to get best fitted trend of our experimental data set. Okay. So we should not confuse in between the correlation, curve fit and causation. So correlation is something which represents the fundamental relation in between our output variable and uh, input variable. Means input means what we are calling as independent variable, and output variable what we are actually obtaining as a consequence of the given input. Okay, and curve fit is something which is particularly related to the statistical quantities where we are nothing but trying to fit some best suited trend line to our data set. Okay, and causation is something which tells the relationship in between the cause and effect. Cause and effect means what are the variables which are causing that phenomenon to occur, and what is the effect of that parameters which we are actually trying to get in our final outcome. Okay, so by just having an overview of our experimental data, we should not make final conclusions. Rather, we should go into fundamental understanding of this phenomenon, and from fundamental understanding, we should try to relate our experimental data. Okay, so that is must while doing the experiments. Then there are few general considerations which we should follow while we are doing experiments. The very first thing is examine the data for consistency. So this is a very simple thing. For example, if we are having some heater and if we are having one thermocouple over here. Okay, so while we are adding the heat into this liquid, so our thermocouple should reflect increase of temperature. Okay, so that is something which is a common understanding. And if upon adding the heat, our thermocouple is showing decrease of temperature, so that is something, it means our data is not in consistency. So we should take care of, and this type of things normally happens when we are doing some gross blunders. Okay, then we should perform statistical analysis of data where appropriate. So obviously we should go for statistical analysis, but also we should not be tempted to go for the statistical analysis where we are not having sufficient sample size available. Okay, because statistical data or statistical analysis is having reliability which is dependent upon the minimum number of the samples. If our data set is not following the criteria of minimum number of data samples, then also we should not blindly go for the statistical analysis. Otherwise, it may also give us some wrong reflection of the physical phenomenon. Then we should estimate the uncertainties in the result. So this is a very important point. So for example, if we are having some pipe and inside this pipe flow of fluid is happening, and say what we are doing, we are actually measuring the flow rate with the help of some device, and what we are doing then, this device is actually having some uncertainty, and say now based on this flow rate data we are theoretically calculating the value of pressure drop. Okay, so whatever the theoretical relation we will be having in between the flow rate and the pressure drop, so while we are applying this theoretical relation, so whatever the number of primary measurements this relation is actually employing, using this relation we should perform the uncertainty analysis, and then while we will be reporting this final pressure drop data, we should mention these uncertainties in our final results, which are derived based on the measurement of primary quantities. Okay, then this is a very important point that we should anticipate the results from theory. So for example, I have just told you in the previous slide that if we are doing the experiment of boiling heat transfer at the same point of time, if we are doing experiment of recording the temperature at different times when a thermometer is actually dipped inside a hot liquid, then also we should, it may happen that while we are getting experimental data in between the temperature and time, it may be best fitted using quadratic fit or cubic fit or fourth order fit, but we should know from our theoretical understanding that nothing but for this type of physical phenomena our results should show exponential variation. So though mathematically or statistically we are finding that some other trend is also actually matching, well matching with our data set, but we should not be tempted to conclude any theoretical or physical explanation from that trend itself. Rather, we should theoretically first analyze the data set and then we should try to make some final conclusion. Okay. And the final thing is correlate data. Obviously, if you have understood the theoretical concept, then it will be easy for you to correlate your data. Okay. So with this slide, now I'll stop our discussion on the experimental analysis of experimental data, and from our next lecture onwards, we will discuss next module where we will be understanding or studying about the different techniques for measurement of the thermophysical.